Hey there, and welcome to the userexperience.org podcast, where I chat with the people creating the products that shape the world. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. All right, and before we dive into today's podcast episode, I wanted to quickly shout out podcast.today, where you can find new podcasts every day, and you can also get free daily emails with curated picks for learning, news, and entertainment. And they have a bunch of newsletters for AI and entrepreneurship, among other things. And I'm also super excited to mention that they mentioned us on their curated list for the 25th of June under the Quick Listens episode 15, which was a nice one with Smit, where we talked about how to design conversational AI. So yeah, make sure to check out Podcast Today. And it is recording. We are live. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Oliver. How are you?
I'm doing good. So today we're back for another episode of the userexperience.org podcast, where I interview people, working in UX and also working in entrepreneurship, marketing, etc. So today on the show we have Scott, and I actually met Scott through a mutual friend, and Scott is a teacher at UMass Boston, among a lot of other things. But before that, I'd like Scott to just briefly introduce himself.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Scott, and I do a lot of things, just like Oliver said. But no, seriously, I am a professor over at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. I'm also a professor at Babson College, which is a business school out in Wellesley, Massachusetts. I also do CMO coaching, do consulting. I have a podcast. I wrote a book called The Next CMO. And as a result, that turned into a community, a podcast, a workshop series, which is a bunch of free workshops for CMOs to help them plan, budget, build out ROI, just do their job a lot better. And so I'm on a quest to help improve the profession for marketing, because it has gotten more and more challenging over the 32 years that I did it. And this is why I'm trying to help educate the next wave of great marketers that are going to come up through the system. Going back to college was one thing that I thought would help with that process. It's been an exciting journey. Dedicated my entire adult life to marketing and sales positions. So this is a great conversation to have. I think we're going to talk a little more in depth on how marketing touches a lot of things, including product and UX today. So I'm excited to have this conversation and meet you all.
Yeah, so we'll definitely dive into those things. Before we do that, I'd like to actually go in a time machine and go back 33 years ago. So I would say like 1 year before you started your career.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of where I'm at right now. So I'm about to graduate and about to start looking for a job in San Francisco, moving there in exactly 1 week from now on June 10th. So my question to you is, if you still remember those days, if you maybe close your eyes for a second, what was it like for young Scott right before you started?
At that point in time, I didn't feel a lot of pain. And so it was good. I recovered from hangovers a lot faster than I do now. But what I will say is that I came out in probably a simpler time. I think for the people that are graduating from college now, it's a lot more complicated. But one thing that I do have a similarity right now with the students that are graduating is that I came out in a recession. It was 1992. We were in kind of a fairly deep recession. There weren't a lot of jobs available. Right now, there's no recession officially, but we're starting to see a tightening up with a lot of companies out there that are basically saying, I'm going to freeze hiring until I figure out what's going to happen with the economy here, what's going to happen with tariffs. And I think that's creating a lot of angst with a lot of the students that are graduating now. I also went through those angst. I came out of college, and the only jobs that I could get was either selling life insurance, which, they were commission-based jobs. So after you sold your family life insurance, which is always a wonderful conversation to have. In case you die, it's like one of those things that it's just so miserable. So I ended up actually taking a job working for the Sherwin-Williams company, which is a paint company, if anybody even knows what the heck they do. At the time, they were a Fortune 500 company. And I actually ended up working in their marketing department, making circulars that went into newspapers, if anybody remembers what those are. And so it was a really exciting job. Obviously, I wasn't all that fulfilled. And then at that point in time, I said, geez, I really got to get into this tech thing. It looks like it may be going in the right direction. I heard about this thing called the internet. It hadn't really emerged. No one was really using it at the time. A lot of the marketing that was being done was still physical in nature. But I said, I think there's something here. Maybe I should go in that direction. I think I was right. I'll take the win on that one. So
So how did you go from I think this might go in the right direction, or I think this is the next big thing, to actually working in tech?
Yeah, so I got a job working for digital consulting, and I squeezed my butt in there. I have no idea why they hired me, because I was doing marketing for B2C and paint, because that works perfectly in going into tech. Obviously, a lot of the stuff when I got into tech was fairly confusing at the time, uh,
Hmm.
but I loved it. And so
What did you like
start
about it?
once you go into tech, you can't get out. Really, it's just one of those things that it's just everything's changing all the time. And if you're the type of person that hates change, well, first of all, you should go into accounting. But secondly, if you do decide to go
Well,
into
my mom is an accountant.
what's that?
My mom is an accountant, and
I'm sure she's
she
a
keeps
lovely woman. I'm
she
sure she's a
keeps
lovely woman. Yes,
she was here. They were visiting me here last week, and she said, "Hey, Oliver, if it doesn't work out in San Francisco, you could always try like maybe accounting or something else." And she keeps trying to
yeah.
push it.
Yeah, I say, look, if there are people out there, Oliver, that absolutely hate change. If you hate change, you like
Hmm.
consistency in your life, accounting is awesome. You are going to wake up and do the same thing for every single year that you work. It is never going to change. And you can go from company to company and you do the same exact work from company to company. If you go into marketing, though, it changes like on a daily basis. And also, from company industry, it changes completely. And so I'm a person that loves change. And so that's why I went in that direction.
And how have
Go
you
ahead.
seen marketing change over the last, I guess, more than quarter of a century?
Well, there are a couple of things that have come out. I guess the first thing was, as I mentioned, the internet. That was kind of exciting. Like
Hmm.
before we did mass marketing, right? Because you couldn't really target people. You could do it a little bit with like direct mail, but most of your marketing was just spray and pray, right? You just try to get to a mass audience, and then hopefully people would react to it. With the internet, over time, not only could we reach a mass audience, but now we could start to understand who the people were. It allowed us to build databases. It allowed us to get more strategic, to understand buying habits. And so as a result, we got more surgical with the marketing we were doing. The marketing was more effective. We only showed people products that they were interested in because they reached out and showed interest. And the marketing just got more and more effective, right? Now we enter in AI, and it's adding in a lot of additional tools that frankly, are removing a lot of the, I would call tactical work, which is a little scary for people coming fresh out of school for those types of jobs. I do think that
And
probably
with tactical work, do you mean like
like
less strategic or busy work?
sending out an email is a tactic, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
not strategic, right? Writing a marketing plan. I don't think that you're going to see AI write a marketing plan for you just yet, right? I think you take because you
Do
got
you think
to
it will at some point?
potentially, yeah, sure, why not? I think I don't know if it ever will because I here's the thing is AI is never going to start a company, right? A person needs to start a company. If AI is starting companies, then we really have no purpose on this planet, right?
Yeah.
So it's usually the drive and initiative of a human being to come up with an idea and start a company. Now, once you go to build the company, there are lots of things you need to do. Those things can be more repetitive in nature, building things out, building a website for you super fast. You can build an AI based website in seconds now using things like HubSpot, and some of these other Wix has AI in it where it'll actually generate the whole website for you, including content and images like in a series of minutes. So
Yeah.
those are the types of things that I get a little nervous about for, say, the younger generation now that's trying to get these tactical jobs. But the strategic elements of marketing, it's going to be tough to replicate it. And the reason why I know this is because I was the co-founder of Plannuh, and what we were trying to do is use AI to help build out marketing plans and help make decisions and recommendations based on data that was coming in. And the reality is that it's really, really hard to do. You're
Hmm.
talking about something, see, like since we were talking about your mother and accounting, like accounting has guardrails, there are rules. If you get creative in accounting, you go to jail, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure that your mother feels that every day that when she goes and screws something up or gets creative accounting, she may spend some time behind bars. In marketing, you actually get dropped in a field of wheat. Like you have no idea what direction to run in. You've got to figure it out. And I don't
Hmm.
know if AI will ever be able to figure out what direction you need to run in. Once you figure out what direction you're going to run in, that's when I think the AI can help assist you in kind of smoothing out the processes and getting tactics done for you That's where I think you'll see more of the AI value
Yeah.
proposition.
So I'd like to bookmark the AI thing because that's something I definitely want to focus on. For now, I just want to take it a little bit back to your career in general, and
Mhm.
maybe like if you reflect on it. I mean, you've definitely had a lot of wins. I think you've had five successful exits. What were some things that looking back you might have done differently, or I think regret is a strong word, but maybe just like lessons learned, or just kind of just as a way to like help people like me think about and reflect before I start doing things, if that
Okay,
makes
well,
sense.
I'm not going to give you any lessons learned on the wins, all five of those, because I wouldn't
Hmm.
change a thing because they were all successful. But I had plenty of losses prior to that, right? And look, I think every single company you go to has a different set of circumstances, and I think the reality is with me, and I think with most people when they get out in the business world, is you don't make the same mistakes twice. You make new mistakes, right? And I
Hmm.
think that's where you got to be on your toes as you're going through your career, is being able to identify where the problems are going to arise. Now, the reason why 5 out of the last 6 companies I worked for had successful exits is by then I had figured out where the mistakes were going to be, because prior to that, I had made plenty of them. And I think, look, the mistakes are going to
Do you
come
have an
along.
example?
Well, the biggest mistakes that I feel like I've made have been with people, right? And
Hmm.
I think at the end of the day, the secret to business, and it may not be in the future, but as of today, the secret to business is people, and it's getting smart people and motivated people, right, to deliver high quality work. And if you can get those people to do that, you'll be successful. If you have people that are not motivated, or you have people that are not really in tune with what you're doing or don't understand what it is you're doing, especially in tech, you find a lot of those people because sometimes the products are so technical they just don't understand how they work or why they're doing it. Then you're going to find yourself in a world of hurt, because it's going
Yeah.
to put more pressure on you to make all the decisions. So I think that the critical element is just finding the right people, nurturing the right people, motivating the right people, giving focus to people, because focus is a big problem. Steve Jobs had this great saying at Apple, and it was basically, it's like, we have no problem killing bad ideas. He said, but what we're really good at is killing good ideas. He said, because good ideas will distract us from the focus that we have identified what we want to be on. Because people that come up with good ideas, they want to do their good ideas, and they'll get passionate about their ideas. And guess what they're not doing? The things that we agreed on that we needed to do as far as our planning and the focus of our company. And
Hmm.
so, these are the types of things that over time I was able to create greater focus. And I think that is probably the reason why I had so much success at the end of my career and so little success at the beginning, is because I think I always got excited about the next great idea and lost focus on what needed to really get done.
Yeah. And how do you distinguish between good ideas and the idea? Is it just based on like what
Well,
you
I
planned
think,
upon, or?
well, see, that this is what it comes down to. So every company, you need to have a vision. And if you don't have a vision for the company, then stop immediately and go back and create one. Okay.
Hmm.
Now, once you have the vision, the next thing you do is you create a strategy to achieve the vision, right? And so this is usually where the disconnect comes, where some founder comes up with this wonderful vision as to where they want to take the product, especially if you're in tech or something else along those lines, where they want to take the product, and then they can't translate that into a strategy for doing it. What ends up happening a lot of times is you'll find a founder will go straight from vision and will hire a bunch of tacticians, and they'll do a bunch of random stuff, not coordinated in any capacity whatsoever. And as a result, you end up failing. It has to go vision, strategy, tactics. The tactics need to draw off the strategy. The strategy are the goals that you set for where you want to go. And then everything you do has got to relate, every tactic has got to relate to the goals, right? If it
Hmm.
doesn't, why are you doing it, right? But the
Yeah.
whole executive team needs to agree on what those goals are in lieu of what you're trying to accomplish from a vision standpoint. And if you don't have that hierarchy on it, you're just going to run all over the place, do a bunch of random acts of whatever heck it is you're doing. I don't care what discipline you're in business. Marketing
Hmm.
and sales is the worst, right? You got salespeople playing in the trees, while marketing's playing on the fairway, and this is not going to create cohesion.
Yeah. And do you have an example of where it kind of broke down, where people didn't do strategy? So you mentioned, wait, let me think. So vision,
Vision,
strategy, execution, or
yeah.
tactics.
It's
Do you
it's
have an
interesting. Like
example of where it went wrong?
yeah, it's interesting. You're going through that process. It's interesting to see watch you do that. But look, all this stuff always comes from, everything in business comes from war, right? And the reason why it comes from war is because it's competitive, right?
Hmm.
So if we have a vision, let's say that we want to take over Canada. Sorry, I don't know who else to attack these days. They look like an easy target. Okay, so let's say we want to go after. We have a vision that we want Canada to be the first state in the United States. By the way, I'm not advocating for this. Canadians, please, I
Purely
love you.
hypothetical.
Okay, you need your own country, but hopefully this is funny, unless you're Canadian, in which case this could be very traumatic. But let's say that we decide we want to take over Canada, right? That's the vision, is we want to create this one large landmass, and we want to create a golden dome over our two countries and have no friction from that standpoint, right? So that's our vision, right? Or that's somebody's vision, right? And then we end up coming up with a strategy. Well, how are we going to do this? Like, how are we going to take over Canada? Like, are we going to do an aerial assault on them? Are we going to do a land assault on them? Right? How are we going to? Are we going to do it by sea? I don't. We've got to figure that out, right? How are we going to do it? And then we figure out, how do we organize our troops to go and take each one of those locations, whether it's we're going after Toronto first or whatever it is. And business is the same way. Like, if I have a vision that, let's say, since we've been talking about AI, let's say I have a vision that I'm going to create this AI that will make you dinner every night. Okay. And I have this vision that people won't have to cook anymore. That's very aspirational vision. Well, all right, well, how am I going to do that? Right. And so the strategy is, well, maybe what we're going to do is all of the different tools, ovens, and everything else, we're going to approach the manufacturers of these appliances, and we are going to put our software into those appliances. That's our strategy. It's a partnering strategy. We're going to put that in there. Then last, we pick out which of those brands we're going to go after, and we send our salespeople in there to go and sell the AI into those things. Very tactical, one by one, as we're trying to nail each one of those down. So that's an example of thinking through each one of those levels. You need all three, and a lot of companies go from vision to tactics because they don't understand how to tie the strategy in. But if you don't understand what the big picture is, it's awfully tough to do the small picture.
Right.
Did
So
I
I'm
just
trying to
blow,
wrap
did
my
I blow your
I'm trying
mind?
to wrap my head around it. So I'm just for myself trying to understand what exactly the difference is between strategy and execution. And is it literally just like granularity? Is that the dimension that we're looking at?
That's
Or is
correct.
it
Yeah. I
okay?
mean, how can I jump from vision to calling Maytag to get my software into their ovens? How do I do that? I mean, like, so, well, I mean, you think about it. Well, see, the way that we'll do this is we'll use a partnering strategy, right? And so, this is why you've got to be thinking about what are those strategies that I can deploy. And then the management team needs to be looking at it from a strategic level. How do we do this? And then the people that are below on the management team need to figure out, okay, now that I have this strategy, what are those points that I need to target and win? So,
Yeah. So I took a quick look at your book,
yeah,
the Next CMO,
yeah,
and I think one of the points that you mentioned also was I think there was three reasons why it sometimes doesn't work when you do a marketing plan, and I think the last one was like a lack of execution. Let me just pull up my notes real quick. One second.
it always comes down to a lack of execution, right? I mean, you can create a great plan, but if you can't execute it, then it's just never going to work out. And it's interesting. You can do this anywhere in your life. This doesn't have to be marketing. You can do anything in your life. You can go through the steps on it and kind of look at, what is it you want to accomplish, right? Do you have a vision for your life? What do you want to do? What's your
Yeah. So my vision is so I want to work on like breaking edge tech and
okay?
then using AI to help people basically.
Okay, great. And what your strategy was to go to college, right?
Yeah.
And then your tactics were to take the courses to help you learn the AI specifics, correct? So
Yeah.
you did it yourself. There you go. So it's you can apply it to everything in your life, right?
And then how do you remain flexible? So, because a lot of times I've like read the Lean Startup. I'm sure you're familiar with that ideology.
Yeah.
How do you still have a vision, but then also remain flexible? And are you also like open to changing the vision?
Oh yeah, all the
And
time.
then,
All the time.
yeah.
Yeah, because here's the thing is, like, you'll start out with one thing and you'll end up with something else. Like, the first company that I started was actually
Hmm.
a beer company, and it was in 1994, and we way ahead of the microbrew revolution here in the United States. We came up with a microbrew, And we made it, and it was terrible. It was the worst beer you've ever had in your life. And so we came up with a slogan that said, if you need a beer real bad, we have a real bad beer. And then we put the poison symbol in the inside of it. And then we ended up selling 3,335 t-shirts that had the logo on it and no beer. So what happened was we started out with this vision to brew beer and sell beer, and it turned into a t-shirt company. So this is where you've got to be flexible and seeing what your audience wants. And this is that's the key element on this, is understanding if you just build a product, it's never a good idea just to build the product, right? You need to talk to people and see if it's viable that people actually want this, right? And then once you figure that out, then only then can you start to build out your product and satisfy those audiences. And you'll hear Steve Jobs. I keep bringing up Steve Jobs. I don't even really like him. I met him. I had a really bad experience with him. But what I will say is this: is that one thing that I disagree with him 100% is he says, "I'm going to build a product and I'm going to show you why you want it." Right? And he said this with the iPhone, which is total BS, Steve. Because the reality was smartphones have been around for a while. I had a Windows phone before it. I had a BlackBerry before it. He took an idea that was already existing that people liked, and he made it better. And he said, "Oh, I'm going to build it, and I'm going to show them why they need it." It's like, we already knew we needed this, Steve. We had been using these devices for a long time. And in fact, if you look at Apple, they haven't innovated squat. The only product that they ever innovated was the Newton, and no one's ever heard of it because it failed, right? They were fast followers in everything that they did. They didn't develop the PC. They were second in the market on it. So if you're going to go out there and you're going to build something completely unique, you better understand what your audience wants. If we created disgusting beer and nobody wanted that, right? We built a great logo and people wanted that. And so you just got to figure out what people want before you go and invest a bunch of time, energy, and money into building a company.
So now I really am curious. What was your experience with Steve Jobs like?
All right. Well, this is a long story. So I went to go work. I told you, digital consulting, my first job in tech, and they had this big trade show. And Steve Jobs had been fired from Apple at the time, and he had started a company called Next. Even though he had been fired, he clearly had not lost his ego. And so they said, "Look, Steve is going to be on the main stage doing the keynote. You've been at the company 2 weeks. You don't know what the hell you're doing. Go down to the curb and wait for Steve Jobs. Hold this sign that says Mr. Jobs and wait for Steve Jobs to pull up in his limousine. Your job, he's going to show up approximately 12 minutes before he's going to speak. It's your job to get him to the stage." Okay. So I sat there with the little sign out in front of the hotel which says Mr. Jobs, and he pulls up and the window comes down and he looks at me and he's on one, like back at that time, like it was the big cell phone. I don't know if you've seen them, like like your arm would start to quiver because the cell phone was so freaking heavy and big. And he's on the phone and he looks at me and he puts the window back up. Right. And I was like, is he coming? And so then he pops out and he's still on the phone and he's talking, and the driver gets out and we start walking. He will not follow me. So he's like moving out in front of me, like, "Mr. Jobs, take a left, take a right, take a left." So we get up to the stage and he hangs up the phone. He hands it to his driver and he turns to me and he goes, he said, and I put up my hands to say hello to him. He didn't shake my hand. He said, "I want you to go down and tell everyone working the doors in the back, no one is to enter or leave when I speak. Can you handle that?" Like, "Yes, Mr. Jobs, I can do it." So I run down and I go talk to all there's a bunch of old guys working the door. Like, "Guys, you got to close the doors as soon as Steve gets out there. He doesn't want anybody entering or leaving." Well, they introduced him. He comes out to the stage, and these guys were old guys. And so they're slowly closing the doors and they're not getting it done in time. So Steve, instead of saying to everybody, "Hey, well, I'm so happy to be here. Usually when people get out there, I'm excited to be here. I'm really interested to talk to you. This is wonderful." Steve Jobs turns around and says to the audience, "No one is to enter or leave when I speak. You in the back, make sure those doors are closed." And that's how he started his presentation. He proceeded to do his presentation. At the end, I was supposed to show him back, and he blew right past me. So that was my original Steve Jobs story. When I was a very young man. I have since had another run-in with him, and I will say he has not improved his attitude one bit. So for those of you that love Steve Jobs, know that he's an incredibly successful businessman. He's created some of those most impactful products on the planet, and he is an a-hole. Rest in
Oh.
peace, Steve.
Do you think that that experience shapes your view on power and leadership?
Yeah, it can. I mean, look, you don't have to be a jerk to be successful. What you have to do is create a vision. You've got to focus the employees and you've got to give them the runway to be successful, right? And I think that's absolutely critical. And I think a lot of the founders that found companies and do become jerks, they're very focused individuals and they're very particular on what they want. And if people aren't doing it the way they want it, they get frustrated. And as a result, they take it out on the people. And that's not the way it works. You're always tough on the work, easy on the people, right? Because at the end of the day, if you get people that are working scared, then they don't come up with their best ideas, right? If you don't focus people, then they're going to come up with their own ideas and work on their own stuff. So it's a delicate balancing act of getting everybody to buy in on a focus, getting everybody marching in the same direction, making sure people stay on the focus without being a jerk about it, right? And that's tough to do. That's why 1 out of every 10 businesses fails.
Yeah, I have a lot of follow-up questions to that, but I do want to make sure we have a little bit of time to touch upon AI, since
Okay.
that's something that I'm really into and I'm sure you're into as well. So if we just take maybe a look back, what was your first interaction with AI like? Yeah, and when was that?
Yeah, my first interaction with AI was in 1995. I went to go work for a company called Invention Machine, and it was a bunch of Russian computer scientists. So the walls came down in 1992, and all of these Russian scientists that had been working on software flooded the United States with this technology that they had built. And everybody in the United States was super excited to see what the Russians had built because we could never see any of this stuff. The only people that saw what they had built were spies, right? And so they brought over this software. It didn't work. So no AI worked for a very long time. There was a lot of smoke and mirrors around it. AI has actually gone through 4 revolutions in the tech industry, and I think the first one was probably in the early 90s. And then as the internet started to shape, then people started using certain algorithms and neural networks to do certain elements of it. And then so I worked at ATG was an AI company. I worked at Recorded Future was an AI company. I started Plannuh with Peter Mahoney. That was an AI company. So I've worked at several AI companies throughout my career, and it's worked for certain elements, but not the way that we had hoped it was going to work. And now, with the generative AI, things have changed a lot, right? It's still not perfect, but you can actually get value out of it. And so I think that's only going to continue to improve. But I think the big drawback on AI, and I think this is where everybody has to cool their jets a little bit, is where does AI get its data from? Gets it from the internet. Is everything on the internet correct? No. What's on the internet? Content, stuff built by people. Are people infallible? Yes, we make mistakes all the time. So the AI only can draw from error-prone content and data that was created by people. So now the question is, you going to trust that? So the other thing is that we're seeing
So
now.
I'd like to push back a little bit on that in
Oh
the sense
God,
that
let's debate. Let's do this.
So I agree. I agree with the idea that it's garbage in, garbage out. I think that's more just of a technical like thing we have to overcome. I think that there are ways to reduce that. For example, creating synthetic data sets where it kind of creates more and more pure or better data sets to train on. And I think now also, I don't know if you've heard about Alpha Evolve from Google,
Mhm.
which is their new algorithm that kind of takes a look at its own algorithm and then rewrites the code for that. So I think right now, for sure, generative AI can definitely is like, you shouldn't trust it with your life. But I think we will get to a point where those issues won't be a huge concern anymore.
They
If
will
that makes
always.
sense.
I'm telling you right now, they'll always be there. Right? I mean, they'll always be there. And here's the reason why. I have never worked on a piece of software that didn't have bugs. Never in my professional career. Some companies that love, their products were exceptionally well developed. I ran product management, and there were over 700 known bugs in the product. So the reality is that we can build all this wonderful stuff, but it's humans building this, and humans make mistakes. And so this software will constantly have bugs in it. Like I got a driving system in my car that does self-driving, right? I've already had a couple mistakes, and I mean this could cost me my life. It's like we didn't work these things out, guys. So this is what I'm saying is that even things that are that critical, software is really difficult to build. It is really, really difficult. Only the smartest people in the world can really work on building out software applications. Now, when we start getting into things like AI, we're starting to get really deep in understanding and things along those lines. But just remember, these are people that are building these systems. And sometimes you have a bad day. Sometimes you didn't have enough coffee. Sometimes you didn't sleep because you've been jamming for a week to make a date that's artificial, right? We all cut corners and make mistakes in order to get our jobs done. And that will happen over and over and over again until humans completely are removed from the equation. The data set that they use is completely scrubbed for 100% accuracy. And here's the key thing. Like when we take news, and this is the most unbelievable stat that I'm going to tell you. If you don't know this already, this is going to blow your mind. Only 10% of what you read in the news is 100% accurate. And that is the information that is being pulled from AI with AI. 10% is 100% accurate.
Yeah.
Did I just bum you out?
Not necessarily.
Okay. All right. Good. I'd like to keep going then. Let's see if we can get that up to a whole 50%. But what I'm saying is this. That's where it's pulling the data from.
Yeah.
Right?
So then in light of this, in spite of the fact that it's not perfect, we do see a transition where companies, like I think you mentioned before previously as well, that companies are maybe thinking again, like rethinking whether they should be hiring. And companies like Duolingo or Klarna are able currently, at least looking like they're replacing some at least entry-level jobs. So then my question to you is what's your vision? Like, what do you vision on what's going to happen in the next couple of years in terms of job opportunities? And maybe what are some tips that you would have for people like me who are about to enter the job market?
Well, I think you're on the right side of the fence. Okay. The jobs that you're looking to do based on where your expertise is, I think you're on the right side of the fence. Okay. I think you'll be fine. I'm more worried about the more tactical jobs. I tell all my students, get into management as fast as you possibly can. Because if you get into management, there'll be management like information systems that will help managers make decisions and things along those lines. But you're never going to have a piece of software manage a human being. Human being is never going to listen to a piece of software to tell them what to do. It's just not going to happen. Okay.
I'm going to write these predictions down and then we'll check in with each other in like 4 or 5 years.
I mean, this is a great debate. You tell me that if your software tool is telling you what to do, you're like, okay, I'm going to listen to the software.
Well, that wraps up this episode. I hope you liked it. If you did, please leave a review and share the podcast. I'd love to hear what you thought. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest, send an email to podcast@userexperience.org. And for more resources, make sure to check out userexperience.org.